The screech of tires on asphalt jolted me from my morning coffee, and I swear you'd have thought the SWAT team was about to bust through my front door. 3 police cruisers swerving into our driveway, red and blue lights splashing across every garage on the block, neighbors peeking through their blinds before most folks had even finished breakfast. I just remember standing there, mug in hand, thinking, "What now, Margaret?" Because, of course, right in the thick of it was Margaret Whitfield, our beloved HOA president, hair shellacked to within an inch of its life, pointing her bony little fingers at my wife like she was trying to summon a witch trial. No joke. You could hear her voice halfway down the street, officers. I'm telling you, she just came back from Iran. Look at her. She's bringing something dangerous into our community. Now picture my wife, Ela, standing perfectly still on the driveway. Calm as ever, hands at her sides, face unreadable in that way you only learn after a decade and a half of federal service. She looked at those cops the way you look at a possum stuck in your trash can, mildly inconvenienced but not especially threatened. The lead officer, big guy with sergeant stripes, kept one hand near his holster as he approached her. And his partner was so tense I could see his jaw clench from my living room. "Ma'am, we've received a report about potential threats and suspicious materials being brought to this address," the sergeant said, trying real hard to sound calm, but you could hear the edge in his voice. "We're going to need to see some identification and ask you a few questions." Isla didn't flinch. She just nodded slow and steady, then reached into her jacket. For a second I saw the officers tense, but what she pulled out wasn't a weapon, it was her badge. Not just any badge, either. The sun caught the gold eagle, and I could practically hear Margaret's jaw hit the curb. Agent Layla Morrison, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Senior Ops Director, International Arms Division. You could have heard a pin drop. Suddenly the sergeant was standing at attention, apologizing faster than a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Agent Morrison, I'm sorry for the confusion. We were just responding to a call about, I understand Sergeant Isla said, already in work mode. You were just doing your job based on the information you had." She turned to Margaret, who was already backing away like she'd seen a ghost. "Though I am curious about the exact nature of the complaint. And that, if you'll let me back up for a sec, was the cherry on a sundae that had been melting for 3 weeks. It all started when Isla finally came home after 8 months overseas classified assignment. Long days, endless nights, that whole thing. She called me from Dulles, voice so tired I barely recognized her, said she'd be home late. At 2 in the morning, a black government SUV dropped her off. Of course, Margaret noticed. Willow Creek Estates is that kind of neighborhood, grass trimmed like a golf course mailbox color, practically written into the 10 Commandments, and one queen bee in a pastel cardigan who's got the whole street on speed dial. From the first day, Margaret had a problem with us. At first it was our shutters. Midnight blue is too bold, she'd sniff, never mind that it matched the door perfectly. Then came the complaints about Isla's work schedule, government plates in the driveway, mysterious packages. Truth is, Ila's job mostly meant paperwork and endless meetings about illegal weapons. Nothing James Bond, unless you count international time zones and jet lag as a form of torture. But try explaining federal arms compliance to someone who gets their kicks measuring trash can placement at sunrise. Margaret's mind was made up. We were up to no good, and Isla's return from Iran had her convinced she'd discovered a spy ring. Next thing I knew, Margaret started playing junior detective, walking her yappy Pomeranian past our house 6-7 times a day, snapping photos of every Amazon truck, stopping to measure the distance from our bins to the curb with one of those retractable tapes. I swear one morning I caught her crouched behind our rose bushes, muttering into her phone like she was tailing Jason Bourne. At the pool, I overheard her telling Sandra Chan that woman's luggage had Iranian stamps all over it. You just can't be too careful these days. You know what I mean? You'd think we were harboring nuclear secrets in the shed. Tried to be neighborly about it, brought her a plate of Ila's baklava, fresh out of the oven, thinking food might thaw the ice. Margaret looked at it like I'd handed her a live grenade. "Serves our country by consorting with Iranians." "I don't think so," she said, lips so tight you'd need a crowbar to pry 'em open. "And I've seen those packages. Brown paper, no return address. I know what that means." What it meant, of course, was Isla's mom sending us tea and spices from Michigan, but at this point Margaret's imagination had left the station. Then the real fun started. That Tuesday, Isla had to transport decommissioned firearms from a federal facility standard protocol, Everything by the book crate, locked and signed for ATF escort the works. She brought the crate home overnight for safekeeping since the destruction site wasn't open until morning. That's when Margaret lost it. I looked outside and saw Margaret pressed against her window binoculars, glued to her face, practically vibrating with anticipation. 10 minutes later, she was on the phone, pacing her porch, gesturing like she was waving down a chopper. 40 minutes after that, here came the cavalry cops at the door asking about federal agents unloading weapons at a residential address, citing an anonymous tip about possible links to Iranian terrorist organizations. I just about lost it. Isla, though, was all business. "Sergeant, that crate contains decommissioned firearms scheduled for destruction," she explained, holding out her orders. "All legal, all documented." She flipped open her folder, and you could see the gears turning in the sergeant's head. His partner holstered his weapon, looking more embarrassed by the second. "Agent Morrison, everything appears to be in order. Sincerely sorry for the intrusion." "No apology necessary from you, Sergeant," Isla replied, cool as ever. "But I am concerned about false reports filed against federal agents. That's a serious matter." Margaret, meanwhile, had gone from pale to seafoam green, clutching her pearls so tight I thought they'd snap. And you better believe by now the neighbors were out in force, half of Willow Creek on their lawns, phones, recording some whispering, some pretending not to stare. The sergeant turned to Margaret, his voice frosty. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor up to 6 months in jail, one $1,000 fine. If it targets a federal agent, it gets a lot worse." Margaret finally sputtered. "How was I supposed to know she was federal? She never said anything. She just skulks around with her foreign connections and her secret packages." I stepped onto the porch, fed up Margaret. "You've never once asked us a normal question. You just watch, assume, and gossip." Isla put a hand on my arm, told the officers she wouldn't press charges if Margaret agreed to back off, but she would be filing formal complaints with the police and the HOA for harassment and discrimination. She gave Margaret a look that could freeze water. The fallout. Oh man, it was like setting off a fire alarm at a cat convention. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, the whole community center filled to the rafters. Everybody wanted a seat for Margaret's public reckoning. The treasurer, Ted Simmons, laid out the evidence photos of Margaret snooping sworn statements from neighbors, a copy of the police transcript. Margaret's lawyer, she brought a lawyer, tried spinning it as civic vigilance. But when Isla calmly read out the bit where Margaret accused her of terrorism ties, even the lawyer winced. And then Isla dropped the bombshell. By acting in her official capacity as board president while engaging in discrimination and harassment, Ms. Whitfield has exposed this association to substantial legal risk. The board didn't even blink, voted unanimously to remove Margaret as president on the spot. But that wasn't the end. Not by a mile. The cops decided to charge Margaret for filing a false report. The DA took an interest, especially since it involved harassment of a federal agent. And then Margaret's day job as a property manager, poof. Clients didn't want to be associated with someone publicly outed for harassing government employees. Her firm suggested she seek opportunities elsewhere. Still, the biggest hit was the civil suit. See, at first Isla just wanted it done. But then Margaret's lawyer sent a letter basically blaming Ila's Iran assignment for bringing suspicion on herself. That pushed Ila over the edge. $15,000 in damages plus all our legal fees. That was the settlement. Channel 7 was there to catch Margaret's meltdown standing on the courthouse steps. Hair all frizzy face, slack with disbelief, muttering $15,000 plus legal fees over and over while her lawyer hustled her into the parking lot. I'll never forget the look on her face as she climbed into her Lexus, scraping her HOA president placard off the windshield, her little kingdom crumbling around her. And you know it's wild how fast the gossip wheel turns when the queen bee gets dethroned. Some folks said she had it coming, others whispered maybe the punishment was too much. Me, I just felt relief and, a little satisfaction. Margaret's reign ended, not with a bang, but with a whimper. And a Channel 7 news van idling at the curb. So let me ask you, was justice really served, or did the neighborhood just trade one set of problems for another? I mean, where's the line between vigilance and paranoia? Was Margaret just a busybody or something worse? I want to know what you think. Tell me down in the comments. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or a neighbor who went way too far? Does justice in a small community even exist? Or is it all just a matter of who gets caught first? Let's hear your stories because trust me, I've got a million more where that came from.